Alright guys, welcome to VALORANT News. The drama continues on the teams that have been and maybe will continue to get kicked out of the VCT by Riot Games in the near future. Ardiis reveals exactly what's happened with the KOI roster that was kicked out as an organisation not long ago and replaced by Gen.G. Some big drama on that at the time. Ardiis reveals that actually he's quite surprised this happened based on the money that they were spending, but in terms of their operational decision making, there was maybe a very clear reason why they've been kicked out of this league. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. We're going to start here because TenZ is putting on, in collaboration with VALORANT of the VCT with Riot, the 2025 VALORANT Community Awards show. So this is pretty great stuff. It's going to be middle of December, live from Los Angeles, and, well, as he says, something I wanted to do for a long time, proud to finally make it happen. So I thought that was going to be spectacular, and Leo was in the replies here, VALORANT were in the replies, so thought that was great to see. And as he says, there'll be categories revealed soon, there'll be finalists revealed soon, teams across VCT and Game Changers, players and coaches rank their top 5 in each category using a points-based system. The 3 players with the most points in each category will be the finalists. So excited to see how that one goes. Speaking of Game Changers, the World Championship is underway. So the Game Changers 2025 Championship in Seoul has just begun. Couple of series currently ongoing. Nova Esports actually just took down Ninetales. So interesting because some of the Chinese, I think the Game Changers teams have not done a great job over the last couple of years at all. That might be a different story this time around. There's also MIBR playing Giant X. That's just got underway as well. Of course, MIBR Game Changers versus some notable players on the other side too. So yeah, early days at the Game Changers World Championship. I'll keep you guys updated on that over the next week and a half or so. There's also last night the Esports Awards. Not everything was announced as usual, but some of the things were. For example, Publisher of the Year went to Riot for, I don't know, what feels like the millionth time in a row. There was also an award for Mimi I thought was really nice. She won Esports Analyst of the Year. So thought that was really cool given the competitiveness of that category. But let's talk about some of the roster stuff. Global Esports, they've been under some questions lately what they're going to do with their roster. There was, I think, some rumours linking Frost to that team as well after what's happened with Talon recently. Now, speaking of Talon, Ban was on Talon, was on T1. Then he was on GE, but that's now no longer the case. So GE moving in a different direction for next season. There's also Baha rounding out the FUT Esports roster. Of course, as always, plenty of Turkish players for consideration. We know BBL, Pacific Esports, all of those teams are taking a different approach, but still probably a Turkish approach. And, well, who will be the best Turkish team next season in EMEA? That is a good question. Speaking of Europe, this is how things currently look. So FUT Esports with that roster that we just discussed, Pacific Esports with a load of players that they might be considering, plenty of players they might be trialing. Again, they're probably going to look for a Turkish lineup. It is very interesting to think about just the number of Turkish players and what you might call like representation, as it were, around the world. There was a little bit of talk about it in the Pacific when we talk about Talon, because Talon represented the Thai scene. Without Talon, is there going to be Thai representation? Now, other regions may say, well, hang on a second, we're also not very well represented either. You look at Europe, BBL, that's effectively the former BBL Pacific team that they've just fully signed up to BBL instead. So that team is basically locked. Fnatic, as we know, have Alpha on their team. FUT Esports is fully Turkish. Karmine Corp have Loon as well on their roster, we think. Na'Vi have a number of Turkish players, as do now Heretics with Woot and Riens and Comeback as well. ULF is a full Turkish team. Pacific is probably going to be fully Turkish. So, yeah, I don't know. I thought that was pretty crazy to look at the league and see where things are going. Every year we have more Turkish players in Europe, but there's just so many talents there that it's understandable. But of course, all the other countries will want to feel like they at least have some ability for representation. But it turned out that the teams that won Ascension were Turkish teams. So, you know, that is what it is, and that's the case for a good reason. Now, speaking of the Americas, there aren't many spots up for grabs there left yet either. And, well, Loud's Ardiis apparently might be helping round out their team, probably as the 6th man. Looks like Verti, Darker, Kawenzan, Pankara, Luxo, and Ardiis rounding out the roster. So, how good's that Loud team going to be? Can they take a step up from last year? It's not been a pretty couple of years for them, really. Certainly, well, it wasn't too bad a couple of years ago. Of course, the year before that was a rather good one. But yeah, last year was not ideal, and they're keeping some players, they're getting rid of some others. But is it going to be enough? I think that Laos, given their representation from that region, and that will continue really with the Brazilian players they continue to have, that shouldn't be an issue when it comes to staying around, but we know that this is a concern for these pro teams, is getting their contracts extended when it comes to 2027 renegotiations and re-contract partnerships. Riot will be blowing up a few of these teams' contracts, and well, some of them they are doing already. Now, speaking of the Americas, Envy are coming in. These are the current, well, let's say spreadsheets looking at the various regions, what things are currently looking like. Not too many spots now left up for grabs, especially with G2 going the Baby Bay route, although there are still some questions as to whether that will be the absolute final decision that they will make. But yes, as it stands, Envy still do need a player. We're pretty sure it's going to be Kesnit alongside Eggster, Poppin, Inspire, and then Stunner from a coaching perspective. But they need a new player. Who are they going to bring in? It's a good question. We currently don't really know. There was a bit of talk about, oh, why don't Envy just, buy out the Shopify team, make them an affiliate? But yeah, I think if there's one organization that has more money than the other, it's probably not Envy in that scenario. The other big drama, though, is on Talon and what's happened with some of these organizations over the last few days. So this is the main one I wanted to get into here, certainly the reaction of Ardiis. So this is why I was just mentioning representation, because there was some discussion here. Jake Sin, the guys at, well, VALORANT Pacific, were saying, we want to make sure we've got a Thai team that can represent the Thai players, and maybe in an ideal world, maintain that Talon roster on a new organization. Frost says, though, that's not going to happen because Riot messed around for some time. Primy has shown interest as well. I mean, look, could Envy go and get Primy? Like, they need someone for Ion, they need someone for Kane. It would be a really interesting player from a personality, not personality, but like from a playstyle perspective. Primy could be a good option, but again, that would be a very interesting and big commitment to change. And Envy, I'm sure, have other ideas as well. But there was talk about Oceanic players. Where are they in the Pacific? Not really been the case. So, of course, certain regions are going to talk about their representation in the league. But what about Koi? Because the last couple of years have been a bit of a mess. Of course, the Guards, they qualified for the Pro League. Then they were out of there. So there was some talk as to whether those players would even be allowed to qualify. G2 eventually came in and made that deal happen. But over the last couple of seasons, Bleed kicked out of the league, no money. Talon kicked out of the league, no money. Koi actually do have money. And they can play their players, as we'll see Ardiis describe. But the problem is that management-wise, it wasn't great. Their competitiveness wasn't ideal. And from a, let's say, watch party perspective and content perspective, they, according to Riot, were not quite doing enough or not quite doing what they initially said that they would do. Now, were Koi the worst of the teams? No. Were they worse than those other teams I just mentioned from a financial, let's say, management perspective? Probably not either. But Riot, at least this is the going theory, Riot saw Gentlemates get relegated from the league after their ascension. Spots came to a conclusion. They saw that Koi were probably technically in a position of breach of their contract, and therefore they decided, okay, we're going to terminate that. We're going to put Gentlemates in. That's certainly the way that Koi thought about it. Evo made that quite clear shortly afterwards. But Ardiis reveals that actually the way that Koi were handled, or the way that they were handling things internally, was an absolute clown show. He says initially he's surprised that they were kicked because they actually did have money. They were paying good salary to the players that they had. But this oversight, or whatever you want to call it, as Ardiis describes, definitely didn't help their case.
Thoughts on Koi booted? I think Koi put in one of the most money, I think top 2 money in the whole org. I was very surprised when they got kicked, by the way. Very surprised, bro. Because some of the salaries that Koi were paying were really good, bro. I mean, okay, I'm going to leak this because I don't give a shit. You know why Zeke and Starkso didn't, not Zeke, Starkso and Shados didn't get kicked? You know why? You don't know why they were on the roster for like 4 years? Because Koi as an organization, the fucking retards didn't give them a break clause, bro. No. Every contract in the world has a clause where you can kick them for 3 months, okay? Any contract in the world in VALORANT has a clause where you can get rid of them after 3 months' salary and you can get them. These retards are Koi. You know what? They forgot to implement this org, bro. So they gave these players a contract that is like, I'd say top 5% contracts. Like, so that means that's one of the best contracts in the whole of VCT. Gave them a 3 or 4 year contract and said, you know what? We can't get rid of you, bro. And guess what, bro? And if you ever get benched on any org, you get half your salary, or normally you get half your salary. They decided to give them the full salary on the bench, so that means they can't bench them. They can't get rid of them, bro. That's why all the fans were like, oh, why does Koi have Zeke? Why does Koi have Stark? So why does Koi have Shados? They couldn't kick them, bro. They physically couldn't get rid of them, bro. You understand? Bro, think about this. They benched one of the players finally. One of the players went on Hawaii, bro. They went on a trip to Hawaii and got paid full salary while being feet up in Hawaii for 2 weeks, bro. Do you understand? And these contracts weren't like a couple of 5, 10K. These are good, juicy contracts, bro. Hey, listen, this is all I'm going to say, bro. That's all I'm going to say, bro. That org maybe deserved to get kicked, bro, just for that mistake, bro. Just for fundamental mistakes like that. That's why maybe that org didn't deserve to be there.
This, I believe, is what eBay has been referring to before they got kicked out, to say, look, this was about to be our first season where we got to probably have our own roster rather than continuing contracts that we didn't necessarily want to continue. Now, of course, this is an absolute mess at a cloud show, right? Like, we see that, like, for example, here, Shados was on Koi for basically 3 years, and during that time period, according to Ardiis, was getting paid a very good salary, and in a way that they couldn't reject the contract. So what he's describing is that there's a pretty common thing that can be done, although Mini Jake actually says this may not be true in Europe, that you can break the contract with a break clause and effectively pay them off a certain amount of money. Certainly in the Americas, this is true. If you want to just end a contract, drop a player, you can say, all right, we're just going to end this contract now, and we have to pay you 3 months of salary to do that. That's a pretty standard clause. Now look, yes, maybe it's illegal in German law to have something like that, but I'm sure it must be possible, right? Like, there's got to be a way to be able to terminate the contract in a way that seems reasonable. Or the other option is you simply just don't sign long-term deals, you give them 1-year deals, and then you extend that in due course if necessary. So clearly Koi had some money, but the way that they handled that money was clearly terrible, and as a result, they spent loads of money. They couldn't form very competitive teams as a result. The players were just chilling, and by the time they finally came around to getting rid of those contracts so they could sign the players that they wanted, then they got kicked out of the league. So, bit of a disaster class. Intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Before we finish up, we've got plenty of Scrimbux to quickly dive through. Furia, it was 10-9 against Nobody Knows. 100 Thieves had some pretty good looking scrims last night. This was the worst of them, 8-9. We know that it's Cryo, Asuna, Bang, alongside Timotino and Vora rounding out that roster. We also saw Shopify with their new team. Kane Zero is actually spotted in here, which is pretty interesting because given that he can't play for Envy in the Pro League, he needs another team. Could that be an option for him? That was certainly a trial they were running. Xander was spotted there as well. 100T 14-3 against another unknown team. Sentinels were playing Envy. That was 8-3 to Envy, which is pretty interesting. That then became 7-9, but that's pretty much where we're going to leave it on the day. So very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.